Praise the Lord. I think the slideshow is still loading, so we'll wait a second for it to come up. But I want to start off by making a point. There's a single choice that any teenager or young adult may remember grueling over. So you remember what it's like to really struggle about this decision, knowing that this one decision would influence your life for some time. Any guesses as to what this choice is? I see a lot of confusion. There's one choice you make as a teenager or young adult, and it changes your life a lot. College, maybe, job, SAT, career. Okay. Do I start with Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle? All of the younger people know what's happening, and if you don't, I'll give you some context. But if you know, you know. There's a game called Pokemon, and actually kind of funny, my brother became very into this game, and the person who first bought him a console where he could play it was actually Pastor Ben. He later regretted this decision. But in this game, you have a choice in the beginning. You have 3 different Pokemon, and they all have different strengths and attributes. So Bulbasaur was a water Pokemon, Charmander was fire, and then, Squirtle was water. Bulbasaur was land, like earth or something like that. And you have to choose very carefully, otherwise you go throughout the game, and once you choose your Pokemon, you cannot change it. But there's one major problem with this game. It took a lot of time, and it also took a lot of strategy, because let's say you chose Charmander as your Pokemon. If you have a fire Pokemon, can fire really fight against water effectively? No, so you have to use strategy, but fire is very effective against land. And then land against water is harder as well. And like many other people, I decided that instead of the time and energy that... I did initially put a lot of time, energy, and strategy into this game, but later on, I just cheated. There are codes where your Pokemon, it goes from level 0 to 100, and your Pokemon can suddenly have level 100 at the very beginning of the game. And yeah, I used some cheat codes, and then all of a sudden I was incredibly rich. And as a high schooler, I thought this was fantastic, because all of a sudden I can easily win the game. I can go to the Elite Four, which are the 4 biggest leaders at the end, and have no problems defeating them. But it actually was not as great as I thought it would be. And the issue is that in our lives, we often focus on the end results, beating the Elite Four, beating all the gym leaders, or reaching a certain point. But cheating at video games has made you weak. And if you cheat through a video game, you don't have the skills that you would have acquired if you took the time and the effort to actually learn how to play the game. And this comes up in the book, It's Not Your Turn by Heather Thompson Day. It says, Jesus, who entered the world as a baby and would need to die as a man, tells us all we need to know about the heavenly value of process. We value the product. God values the entire process. Our topic for today is, it is about the process. And cheat code is kind of the quick version of it. And just in case any of you do not know who I am, my name is Nina Thomas. I'm an urban educator, speaker, and blogger, and you can follow at Brown Light Curry if you would like. I taught special education for years, and now I teach English. The issue with focusing on the end product is if we focus on the results, winning, going past all the gym leaders, we may not be ready for the end product that we desire. Okay, so I have a few questions for you guys. Who here would like to learn how to play guitar without lessons? Okay, a couple of you. Some of you are younger. Who wants to speak a new language at this exact moment? I would love to know Malayalam. That'd be fantastic. Who would like to graduate with their PhD? That would be great. Become a world-renowned leader without ever having led something. Okay, no one wants to become a leader except Zoe. Okay, so has anyone ever seen what the fingers of a guitar player look like? Oh, okay, what do they look like? Are they soft and nice? No, they're rough, right? So why are the fingers of guitar players so rough? Exactly, you have to press the string really hard to play it. And why do you need those calluses? How do they help you? Yeah?
Because you'll break.
Because it'll break. Well, yeah, your finger will get hurt if you're not, actually being able to press it. You might bleed if all of a sudden you're deciding to play like a... Okay, now he's participating a little bit too much. But yeah, so your fingers might actually bleed if all of a sudden you're playing a extremely hard song and you never acquire those calluses on your hand. And the same thing might happen with us if we are going to have an end product. If God wants us to reach a certain place, but we haven't developed those calluses or those muscles or those traits that we need in order to be ready for that end product. And that's why in James 1:2 it says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds." And why? Why do we need to count it as joy? James 1:3-4 says, "For we know that testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." Without that process, you are not complete. You do not have the skills that you need in order for the end of the journey. And this is also a common theme in the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm not sure if any of you have read The Alchemist. We're about to have spoilers, so if any of you plan on reading it, you could just close your ears for a second. But The Alchemist is a book about a man who goes on a journey to find a treasure. And while traveling on that journey, he has to overcome these different obstacles that teach him different lessons. And in the end, after traveling for a long time, looking at different paths, going different ways, he learns that the treasure that he was looking for the whole time was under a sycamore tree in his home. This man had gone on a journey all around the earth, looked everywhere for this treasure, and in the end, it was in his own home. And we may be tempted to think that, oh, this means I shouldn't have to leave my home, but that's not the point. In order for him to be ready to see that treasure, he had to go through a process of learning different things, interacting with different people to be ready for that time. And we see this is also the case for Israel's 40-year journey. Deuteronomy 1:2 says, "It is 11 days' journey from Horeb to the way to Mount Seir from Kadesh Barnea." We've all heard this story before, but I will repeat some of it so you have a little bit of context. But when Israel was leaving Egypt to the Promised Land, their journey was supposed to take 11 days. And there's actually a route of how it could have been a very direct journey versus the way that God actually took them. Exodus 13:17-18 says, "When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, 'Lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt.'" This verse tells us that if they were to take the cheat code, if they were to take the more direct route, God knew that they would change their mind, that they would not be ready for that end product. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea, and the people of Egypt went up out of the land of Egypt, equipped for battle. And this leads to the point that sometimes we need the journey because we are not yet ready for the destination. Or if we go this shorter route, we might not even make it to the end product that God has in mind for us. Israel was not yet unified as a nation, and that they needed that journey in order to have that unification. And keep in mind, in this case, the journey was also a punishment of sorts, but this is not always the case for us in our lives. Another point I want to make is that the journey teaches you that God will provide.
Hallelujah.
Not your efforts, your forethought, preparation, or worldly measures. Sometimes we need to come to a place where we realize that God will provide for us.
Hallelujah.
Genesis 22:8, we are reminded again of the story of Abraham. He had waited years to have a child. And finally, God asked him to go sacrifice his son. It says, Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the two of them went on together. A lot of times when we hear this story, I think we naturally think that it is a story about sacrifice. And it is a story about sacrifice, the willingness to give up whatever it is that we value most. But it is also a story about provision and God's ability to provide for all of our needs. What happens when God asks us to give up what we value most? Maybe we know deep down that God will provide, but maybe we also know that we might not like how he chooses to do this. Can we trust God if he provides by asking us to give up what we value most? I think of the rich man who was not able to enter the kingdom of heaven. He was willing to give up everything for God, but part of his journey required him to give up his money. And his unwillingness to do that led to him being unable to enter the kingdom of heaven. Genesis 22:13-14 says, Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horn. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided.
Hallelujah.
Why did God wait to give the ram? Why did he wait? He knew that Abraham needed to go through a process of being willing to give up whatever it was that he valued most. And maybe in our lives, this might be our job. Maybe it is our friends. Maybe it is our community. God puts us into a situation where we have to be willing to give that up. But this is a part of our development, being able to be ready for what God has in mind for us. We also see this in Elijah. Elijah 17:2-4 and verse 6. During this time, there's a famine in the land. There is no water, no provision, nothing. And God could have just, fast forwarded, give rain to everyone. But in this context, we see it says, the word of the Lord came to him. Depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from that brook. In this verse, we see that for Elijah, he had to go on a journey of learning that God would provide for his food. And sometimes God will provide for us in tiny ways to remind us and teach us that he will also provide for us in much bigger ways as well. In the process of God working through Elijah to speak to Ahab, God was able to provide and prepare him for a later time when he would be fighting against his own insecurities, his own doubt, his own turmoil. He needed this moment of preparation to overcome what would later come in his life. The process teaches us also that God is in control.
Amen.
Following God does not mean that we will not enter the lion's den. And we see this in Daniel 6:5. Then the men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. So there's a man named Daniel. He is righteous. And these people want to harm him. They want to cause trouble to him. So they realize the only way to cause trouble to him is to find a way that they make a law where Daniel cannot pray to God. So in this process, Daniel decides that he's not afraid of the laws of men. He is more concerned about following God. So he continues to pray. And because he continues to pray, what happens is he is put into a situation where he is thrown into a den of lions. So this tells us that, again, following God does not mean that we will not enter the lion's den. It means that when we enter that situation, that lion's den, God will shut the mouths of the lions.
Hallelujah.
Daniel 6:21-22 says, Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angels and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me because I have been found blameless before him. The him that Daniel is referring to is not the king, it is God. So sometimes in our lives, we're in a context where maybe society or our job or culture may tell us we are wrong about something, but it is not those people's opinions that matter. Are we found righteous before God first? And they have not harmed me because I have been found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Daniel did not care about what the king thought about him. He cared first and foremost about what God thought. In this case, the journey was not about Daniel. It was actually about the king. Because Daniel's choice to follow God, to enter that lion's den, his king was able to see the power of his God. So sometimes our journey is not always about us. Maybe we will be a witness in somebody else's life. They will see the way that God's working in our lives and come to him through that process. Psalms 118:6 says, The Lord is on my side. I will not fear. What can man do to me?
Hallelujah.
If you cannot learn that God will provide today and that he is in control, how can you possibly be ready for what he has in mind for you? So in your lives, the different situations you're going through are all preparing you for that. The process will also prepare you. Matthew 25:1-3 and 10 leads us through the story of the 10 virgins. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like the 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. For the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. So on this journey, we see the 10 of the virgins on their journey for being ready for the bridegroom. They did not use the time that they were in this process effectively. And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. So during the time when some prepared during the process, others did not. Those for whom were unprepared had to ultimately pay a cost. Not taking the oil are times that we waste the process, not believing that what we do is important. I like to say that this is similar to, let's say there's two people and they're both learning to play guitar, for example. You both have the same 10 lessons. One person skips it, right? It's fantastic. Don't have to go to lessons. The other person goes to it and spends that time learning and growing. The time has still passed, but your choice in the process will change the end result. The first time I ever spoke publicly, it was actually in this church, and I was really, really bad. Does anyone here remember speech competitions? Yes, it was during speech competitions. Oh, you guys do it too, I didn't know. So there's speech competitions when you're a certain age, you have to come up and give a speech. And I remember I was so bad that my mother let me know about it, and some of the judges also let me know, you as a whole were, your grade level was pretty awful at giving your speeches. And I remember at the time just feeling okay, that was fantastic. But every time I competed for speech prizes or spoke publicly for work or gave a youth sermon that felt small, it was even preparing me for today, one day when I would have the chance to speak for a Sunday sermon to all of you. So there might be tinier moments in your life where you're giving a speech that you have 5 minutes to prepare for a youth sermon, and it feels pretty small. But don't waste that time, because God will use that later for a bigger purpose that he has in mind for you. Philippians 1:6 says, And I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Remember, there is a reason for everything that you are going through right now. May God bless you with these words.